Hi guys, today we're here with Blitzkrieg Motorsports to take a look at the Gen 1, Gen 2, and Gen 3 versions of their mid-travel kits. And I got James here and Dave to help us go through the kits, show you guys the differences, the similarities, the cost, and show you guys the badass rear end on the Gen 3, which I think you guys are gonna really enjoy. Let's start off with what we have here, right? We have a Gen 1, which in my opinion, it's still the best. A Gen 2, which is technically a 2017 converted to a Gen 2, and the Gen 3, right? So what's the big differences between the three kits, the front kits?
Kit-wise, they're really similar. The Gen 3 is going to be the largest difference between all three. Okay. Gen 1 and Gen 2 have very similar lower control arms with the pivot barrel slightly shifted. You've got different size pockets front and rear between Gen 1 and Gen 2, which we shifted, but it's the same basic design for the lower control arm, for the spindle, and the upper control arm. The trucks are all very, very similar. This truck needed a coil bucket conversion because it was an F150, which we added and then threw in the Gen 2 shock. Other than that, they're all very similar between Gen 1 and Gen 2, with a slight difference in the frame. The Gen 3 has a fully redesigned kit. The big difference being the spindle. Ford did a new electronic IWE, so we had to drastically modify the spindle block to get that to fit and clear, as well as the steering on this is different from the rack, so we had to modify that to get the steering proper.
Can you do an IWE delete on a Gen 3?
I do not think that you can because of the electronics, but we fully redesigned our spindle from the ground up so that it would work just as factory.
Yeah, because the IWE and the wheel speed sensor are one unit now, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all built in. It still has a vacuum line on it, it looks like, and then you have the electronics that go with it. It's got a much larger module sitting off the top of the cylinder, so we had to modify the spindle block and clear all that out to make it fit.
I noticed a lot of these, you guys have started doing billet upper control arms too, right?
Correct,
Can you do billet across the board?
Yeah, so we have billet across the board, and we have now offered billet tie rods as well, which was something we weren't doing originally and started to add in to go with our OEM line. For instance, this truck is all steel. This truck is billet upper, steel tie rod. This truck is billet for both. So you have the options to do anything you want. Some people like the idea of still having like a steel upper control arm.
What kind of price point are we looking at for the kits, and then how much to install them? So why don't we start off with like the Gen 1, and is there a difference in price between the kits too?
So all three kits have the same price, which is $7,700. All three kits carry the same basic install price, which we charge $2,500. From the $2,500, we can do additional frame plating. So if you check out any of these trucks, they're gonna have similar frame plating. These two have frame plating both behind and in front of the coil bucket. The Gen 1 just has it in the back. We're thinking about adding it on the front next time this one comes in for the prep. So
now, you guys do reinforcer too on the pivots as well, right?
Correct, yeah. So we'll do an overlay on the lower control arm pivots. So we'll double that up, and then we add a weld washer, which is our alignment lockout that we do in the lower. Set it up with where we want it. We make the adjustments in the upper control arm and you're locked in. So theoretically, you should never have to mess with the alignment after you've put it on until you take it apart for a prep. It should never be able to go out.
Now, what shocks can you support? I see all these guys have Kings. I know there's a lot of preferences. A lot of people love Kings. What shocks can you guys support?
Fox, King, Icon, but really it's the OEM replacement coilover. So any of the big brands, that's gonna bolt right up to the kit. And then with the bypasses, it's really up to you. It's a spec bypass that we build, but you can do 2.5, 3.0, 3.5. We offer a 3.0 generally when we sell them. I think that's probably the best. A lot of people like 3.5s. We did a 3.5 on the Gen 3 because it was a show build initially, but the 3.0 that we spec out with the fin reservoir and the tube setup performs really, really well, and I think it saves a little bit of money to run the 3.0 than the 3.5, and you don't necessarily need it. For a stock pivot kit, I think a 3.0 is sufficient.
So we're looking at $7,700 for the kit, $2,500 for install, and then you pick your shocks.
You pick your shocks, and then the level of frame plating you want. None, front and back, just back. Frame plating will run you anywhere from $500 up to $1,000, depending on how crazy you want to get it.
Don't skimp on frame plating. You'll regret it.
Yeah, we always do the weld washer on the lower control arm pivots because we lock that alignment, but the doublers are an option if people want it, and it's not that much more, and it really solidifies everything. You see how these ears bend when people are taking them out and they're running them hard.
Now, we've been watching these trucks hit the trails all day today, and we've been having a lot of fun just out here in Anza Borrego, Ocotillo, and they've been killing it. We'll show you guys some of those clips, and then we're gonna come back and do a deep dive on the Gen 3, especially that rear end. Can't be mad at that.
We need to slow the rebound down.
It's not the same with V8.
Does not sound like Anthony's, that's for sure.
I wanted to do a little bit extra time on the rear because of how special this is. If you guys watch these videos, we've already done a whole setup on your long travel kit, and what I think is cool is your mid travel is very much derivative of your long travel kit, right? There's a lot of similarities to it, but what we got back here is very unique and it's very different from anything else on the market. So this right here is your new mid travel, or is this your long travel setup back here?
I mean, this would technically be a long travel setup. It uses the stock pivots with the link system, at least for the 4 links. It's a custom panhard bar mount. So I'd still consider it a long travel. It's getting, over 20 inches of travel in this particular setup, and it will get more if the customer desires. So I would definitely call this a full long travel setup.
Let's kind of go through what we got going on here. So first of all, with the shocks, what do we have here is the bypass and the coilover.
This has got a 3.0 coilover and a 3.5 bypass. They're both remote reservoir. This truck was built as a SEMA vehicle, so some of the extra frills that go with the kit are not something that we would typically spec out. If a customer just called up and said, hey, I want something like that, we would probably build it a little different. You don't necessarily need 4 giant long remote finned reservoirs mounted to the bed cage, but it was a show vehicle, so there is some extra that goes with that.
What's the stroke on the shocks?
These are both 18-inch shocks right now.
18?
Yeah, they're both 18s. None of this was show stuff, what was available, what could we get in a pinch. There's multiple ways to get this to work and to be able to build this setup. It's really up to the customer how they want to spec it. We were able to cycle upper 20s on travel with just the rear end and the links. If a customer so desired, they could order really long shocks sticking way up out of the bed and pull a bunch more travel with the 2-piece drive shaft. I'm actually really happy with the dual 18 setup. That's probably what I would sell to people moving forward, is a dual 18, because it's got a good amount of travel. It performs well. It doesn't stick up out of the bed crazy high, but kind of ridiculous. So I think it's a really good setup. This has IBP coilovers, again, for the show. I wouldn't necessarily do IBPs moving forward.
But it's still a dual stage coilover.
Correct, it's still
too.
a dual rate coilover. I would
dual
definitely still do the dual rate. Obviously, you saw this is day 1 of testing out of the box. We're still playing with spring rate. We've got a 175/300, and we're gonna tweak that a little bit. We adjusted the crossovers yesterday before we took it out this morning. We're gonna play with ride height. We're gonna play with spring rate, continue to tune it, mess with the bypasses as well, and do some rebuilding.
Now this next part right here, we got Blitzkrieg arms, right? Are those your standard arms, or are they special for the long travel?
So those are our standard replacement upper and lower links. You have a stock Raptor and you want to replace those, this is exactly what we would sell you. We have our stock replacement panhard bar as well. This is a custom one. So the whole idea was building blocks, stepping stones to continue to build your truck and not have to replace a lot of stuff. So this 4-link kit will move forward to any long travel you do, and you just replace the panhard bar when we do the custom fabrication.
Do you guys replace the mounts on the axle as well?
On this kit we did, so everything was cut off. Everything on here is fresh and new, custom fabricated by.
The front mounts on the frame, those are the same, right? Those are the stock ones?
Those are stock.
But on the axle, are those the same stock ones, or those get upgraded?
Axle are the same for the link. So all of that is exactly the same. We cut your shock mounts off, we cut that coil perch off, and we cut the pan hard bar mounts off.
Another thing that's really cool about this is the way you guys have integrated the bump stop. What stroke is that bump stock? And then talk about how it's integrated in the frame like that, which I think is really cool.
That's a 2" by 2" stroke bump stop on there. We went with a 2" because the 2.5 was going to be too big for the frame, and it was going to take a lot of work to get it done in the time frame. 2.5 is totally doable. Is it necessary? Probably not. If a customer wanted to do 2.5s, we'd absolutely do it. The 2" sits inside the frame really nicely with the can in there, and it's plenty sufficient for the setup, especially with that bypass and the bump zone that that bypass creates. It's perfect for that.
What I think is the real star of the show, and some may disagree with me, but I don't care, is the pan hard bar design. The amount of reinforcement that went into it, that's key to allow this thing to function correctly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The pan hard bar and the Sagita is what's setting all of this geometry and the way the kit cycles. If your pan hard bar isn't tuned and set up perfectly, then that's when you're going to get a lot of that left to right swing. You're going to get funky or track width change and wheelbase change as it moves front to back unevenly side to side.
That's when you see another brand out there, right? Where when it's full droop, it kind of one side leans forward, right? That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Because as it's coming down and it's tugging on itself, it's going to want to rotate this way if it's not set up properly. So it's going to do this, as well as a 5-link setup is going to swing in an arc like this, left to right. So you need to get that pan hard bar set up perfectly at ride height so that you minimize that back and forth sway that you get.
I think we were talking about it earlier. It only has about a 1/2 inch sway forward when it's at full droop.
Correct.
So it's almost a straight drop down.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, we have almost an unmeasurable with sidewall entire left to right swing that we got out of this. And as a prototype, moving forward, we would like to get that to a true 0 on the next one that we build. Okay. Now that we have all of our baselines and our measurements for everything.
Now let's talk about the rack, because the rack design is also a little bit different than a lot of your mid-travel racks. So let's open up this tailgate and take a look at that. When you typically see these set up, any mid-travel kit that you look at out there, it's just the rack sitting on the bed bolts, usually just the 4 bed bolts, the middle ones and the ones closest to the cab, and that's it. And for the most part, for your typical mid-travel kit, that is okay. But when you start pulling more than 18 inches of travel, you need a different approach. And that's kind of what I'm seeing here, right? This rack is not just mounted to the bed, it's also mounted directly to the frame, right?
Correct, yeah. So we have 4 points that are mounted directly to the frame, skips the bed altogether. We're still using the bed bolts, but the main points of contact are the 4 that we use to the frame. And the main reason we did that is on a leaf spring truck, the leaf springs are holding the vehicle in the air. You remove the shocks, the truck still on the ground can drive around. When you go to a link setup like this, now the coil-overs are what's holding the vehicle in the air. So we didn't want to have that much force applied through those little bed bolts and clips. We wanted to be solid mounted up to the frame like you would see on more of our heavy pre-runner or race builds. Thought it was really important to have that reinforcement from a safety standpoint when these things get driven really hard.
Really shows the differences in this too, right? And are you guys going to make the whole rack all the way to the back standard as part of the kit?
This setup is pretty typical of what we build on any of these trucks. Everyone basically wants a jack, they want a jug, they want spare tires,
bed support.
When someone calls up and says, hey, how much is a rear setup for a long travel setup for the Gen 3? I'm going to quote you for this because it's what we typically build. If you say, oh, I don't want all of that, I still need to use my truck for XYZ during the day, it would be just the front shock portion, like you see some other brands doing.
If you're going to upgrade your Link truck, you really need to do a full bed cage setup anyways, because the amount of movement, the amount of capability the truck is going to have, you need to reinforce this whole area. This thing is pretty unique, but what's the cost of this kit, the way it's set up?
The upper and lower links are about $3,200. That's just the straight OEM replacement links. The pan hard bar is going to run you, in the stock setup, if you're buying our 5-link, the whole kit runs up about $4,000. When you buy a 5-link kit as a package, you save a little bit of money. So you'd spend, let's say, $3,800 for a 5-link, and then a year down the road, you decide to do this. We're going to get rid of the pan hard bar. This setup with all the custom fabrication is around $25,000. Could be 20, could be 30, depending on what the customer wants. You can see we paneled in here on both the back and the insides.
Oh, I'm so jealous of those panels.
They're pulled right now because we were messing with the shocks a little bit, but this was all paneled in. So that's an add to make it a little bit nicer. It doesn't need it. Say $25,000 is probably what your labor cost to get this built out.
Which is not bad considering what your typical Link kit out there costs. there's another company out there doing link kit conversions on Gen 2s, Gen 3s, and it's pretty pricey, right? It's in the 60K range. It's pretty high up there. To see this on the Gen 3 and what you guys done is pretty impressive. And what's cool is I think a lot of what I see on here, you guys can adapt it for the Gen 2. And are you guys going to be working on doing that as well?
That's our plan, is to get the 5-link setup onto the Gen 1 and Gen 2, waiting for a couple people to finally pull the trigger to do it with us.
Cool.
I know they want to, and we want to do it too, because it's a great cost saving versus our traditional 4-link setup like you see some of the other trucks. The other truck we shot the video on. It's great because you get to keep your stock fuel tank, and when you don't have to modify the fuel system and all that crazy plumbing that goes with it, it saves a lot of money. And it's, performs really well if you're not looking to take that crazy plunge, or you just have a mid-travel up front and you're not looking to go long travel and fully cage the truck.
All right, so now we got Dave back. Dave, you handle most of the sales, right?
Yeah, I handle everything up front.
Somebody doesn't pick up the phone or doesn't answer your email, this is the guy you got to get mad at.
That's me.
These kits are really cool. I've been a real big fan of all of you guys, right? When I met James a long time ago with John Kilbourne, you had Blitzkrieg's kits on the shelf, and you were a big fan of them. You got me into them. You got a lot of us into them. If people want to get these kits, it's available for all 3 versions, right? So let's kind of talk real quick again about what it's available for, what are the options, and let's talk about the Gen 2 as well. Gen 2 link conversion.
Absolutely. I'm excited for that one because it's going to open the world of linking our trucks and stuff. I want to get it on the Gen 1, the Gen 2, and then obviously we already have it on the Gen 3, right?
Yeah.
On all these trucks, when we go through and we're speccing out the trucks for our customers, I sit down with each one of our customers and really go through and detail a full plan for you. Not just, hey, here's a kit. We're going to go through the full plan, and it may just have this section today. We may just start with the front, we may just start with the rear, but we're gonna go through a full plan for you and make sure everything is dialed for you and exactly what you want for your truck.
Now, as far as options go, right, you can do steel all arms, right? So you can do upper and lower steel arms, and you can choose to go billet. Can you do are you guys doing a billet spindle yet or no?
No billet spindles.
Okay, I know those are rare.
Yeah, and it costs a lot of money. I mean, our spindles are probably the most expensive part of this, but it's one of the most important parts of the truck as well.
You get those people, they're like, oh, I'd absolutely love a billet spindle. Like, will you guys make me one? And we're like, absolutely, here's a quote. And then you never hear from them again. Same thing with billet trailing arms for traditional pre-runners and long travels. So many people ask us, and then we tell them, and then they disappear.
What's the cost difference of going to like a steel arm or a billet arm, or does that matter?
Yeah, so it's a very small jump. It's only about $700 from the steel to the billet aluminum.
If you want an all steel kit, you're about $7,000. Billet uppers and billet kit, you're looking at about $7,700. Now, does that include the tie rods and all that piece of it?
It includes everything to install it onto your truck.
I love that because it makes it easier to order, right? I always hate the kits where you have to buy the kit, you have to buy the tie rod separately, you have to buy the reinforcements separately, right?
Yep.
You guys have a lot of it standard. Now, this kit is available for all 3 versions of the truck. The front kit is. As far as installation goes, is this something that you guys recommend that you guys, they bring the trucks to you guys, or can anybody install a kit like this?
On the mid-travel kits, a lot of people will install it themselves, but we do recommend having it set up with our company so we can set all the alignment numbers. We can make sure everything gets installed properly. We go out and we've got 3 trucks here today with our customers. We take our customers out and we go out and tune with them and make sure everything's functioning properly and stuff. So
yeah, you
it's
definitely want to come
part
out
of the package.
You definitely want to come out and tune with these guys. Not many shops offer it. I know some of the big shops out here do, some don't. Make sure you guys take advantage of that. And as far as installation goes, it's about $2,500 depending on the reinforcement that you guys select, right? Which, again, guys, we've talked about it many times on this channel. We're going to do a dedicated video on it. Reinforcement is important, especially as you start upgrading the trucks. We're already damaging them with its stock. As soon as you upgrade the capability, you need to reinforce the frame so you can take the extra load. The rear kit on this truck is pretty impressive. We saw it today, untuned. It's doing really good. It's performing pretty cool.
Out of the box. We had a blast with it.
The only thing that limited us today was traffic.
Yes,
it was just too much traffic.
It is New Year's weekend and there's a lot of people out here, but we managed to get some fun runs out there.
Now, are you guys planning to do some actual full-on tuning with it? Because I know this is still fresh off, the build floor, right? And it went to SEMA. So are you guys still going to be doing some tuning with, some tweaking?
Yeah, so we're talking with our good friends over at King Shocks. We're going to go out with them. We're also bringing another tuner in, and we're gonna have a full truck that comes out and actually takes the shocks apart. And if we need to revalve them, we can revalve them live right there and get your truck dialed as best as we possibly can.
One thing that really catches my eye is that you guys said that link kit can be adapted for all 3 versions of the truck.
Yes.
So if you wanted to link a Gen 1 like mine, baby, we could do it with that kit. And we're looking at about $2,500 with your typical rack setup in the back, which That's not too bad. I mean, I know it sounds expensive, but that's not too bad considering what you're getting and the amount of work that's being put into it.
When you go from having a leaf sprung truck and going into a full link truck that's properly tuned, it's a night and day difference.
Oh yeah.
You know, everybody gets that bucking and stuff like that in the back end of their truck, and most of that all goes away.
Yeah, and your typical link kit is double the cost of what you guys are, you know, assessing, right? Your 25K. Your typical link kit's going to cost you 50K. Yes, it's probably going to do a little bit more inches of travel, but it's cost prohibitive for most people. When you kind of bring the cost down to about 25K, that makes it affordable.
And it's more in line with what the front of these particular trucks have. It would be overkill for us to go in, fully link the back of a truck, and then have a stock pivot, stock bucket, mid-travel kit on the front. It's just not going to make sense. And then you're going to beat up the front like you've seen some people do, and then you're going to need to go to long travel after you damage the front anyways, and now you're spiraling out of control. So it gives you a good middle ground for everything to work together.
I'm a big fan of these guys. You know, we've been talking about Blitz for a while. How do they get a hold of you guys to order a kit?
One, I mean, our Instagram, everybody follows it. Message us there. We have an email, support@blitzkriegoffroad.com, and as well as our telephone number. It's 714-841-1862. Give me a call. We'll go through and we'll make sure we take care of every little need on your truck. We can even get into lighting and radios and all that kind of stuff as well. So if you guys need anything, even if it's not a big, large build like this, we take care of a lot of little stuff too.
I think that's kind of key to call out too, guys, because I think, James, you started off doing truck prep for other people, and that evolved to building trucks and all that stuff. So you guys have the experience to really take care of other people's builds, right? It's not just Blitz that's done at your shop in LA, right?
Correct, yeah. Yep. So we like to be able to have our customers always be returning. As you can see, the guys that are out here with us, they're not just our customers, they're friends. They're people that we see outside of work that we spend time with. And we like to develop those relationships with all our customers and keep you coming back so that, you know, your truck does get prepped properly. That's a big thing with these. When you're doing these performance parts, there's maintenance intervals that have to happen so that you don't damage stuff. So it's good to always be in contact with your customers and say, hey, come in for your pre-season prep so we can make sure that everything's functioning and isn't going to break down on you out there, and it keeps you coming back and keeps, you know, our relationship good and your truck functioning well.
All right, guys. Well, if you guys have any questions or comments, put them down below, or shoot Dave an email. He's the guy taking care of the Instagram and all that stuff. So we don't respond, that's what you get. All right, guys. Well, thanks a lot, guys, for the access to the trucks, for letting us film it today. It was pretty badass. It's a lot of fun. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
All right.